Welcome. Today we're going to be turning this ornament. Very simple, easy ornament to turn, especially for a beginner like myself. Let me start off. You don't need the most expensive lathe out there on the market, though I'm sure it probably helps a little bit. This lathe here is an old Craftsman lathe. Pick up for $100 on Facebook Marketplace. I've had it for about 20 years. It's been in my family for about 40. And I think it's barely been used. Now that my kids are a little bit older, I'm starting to venture out and do some things that I love. So one thing that I found is I had some cheap tools that were given to me with this. You had to keep sharp. But when I talked to a couple old timers, they kind of turned me onto these carbide tools. Don't have to spend a bunch of money right at the beginning for a sharpening jig. And they've really helped me out a little bit. I don't have a bunch of different profiles. I use 3 different profiles, a round, a square, and one with a little point on it. And it's kind of simplified the process than playing with all the big ones. So the first thing I was doing here is I created an edge to get started. And then I'm using my calipers. This is going to be approximately 1.75 inches tall. So I'm going to put that edge on and kind of take out a little bit of material to get a shape of a cylinder. Now, I figured out all these measurements by actually going out in the woods and picking up some acorns and looking for my perfect acorn. Then I took some measurements with my caliper and created a formula that I make any size acorn I wanted with those dimensions. Which, if you check out episode 19 in my Just for Fun off-grid man cave build, you'll see me building a post topper with that formula, and I walk you through it. So the next step here is I went about 9/16 down. This is going to be the top of my acorn and where the cap of the acorn is. So from that point, I'm going to take the lower section down to about 1.5 inches. And when I did my formula initially, and I looked at these acorns, it seemed as if there was a flat spot in the acorn for a certain distance. But I've kind of got away from that a little bit because they just didn't look right being so symmetrical. But I do kind of use that mark still to kind of get the basic shape that I was going for originally. And you'll see me going kind of that line, tapering it off. And here I'm going to be kind of starting to just taper everything off. And I'm using this carbide tool. This one's the round one, and it kind of gives me a little bit of control. And then I'll go to my square one and take off a little bit more here and there. So for any of you guys wondering, this project took me about 25 minutes to do. I've done a couple of them now, so I've gotten a little bit faster. But I did speed up the video of me making the acorn to make the video flow a little better. So here's the area I was talking about earlier. You can see that flat spot. It just looks too symmetrical. Every time I did one, we kind of improved little bit by little bit, playing with it, tweaking it. And we found that that flat spot just doesn't look right when you carve it, even though everyone out in the woods seemed to have it. So after I get my general shape down, I go through and I just give it a little bit more taper. And there's a few other little details I put on it. such as a little nub on the bottom. The ones that I picked up off the ground, they didn't have that little nub from the red oaks that I've got out in the woods and the white oaks. So that's one of the first things that I've learned here, starting to turn, is that sometimes you just need to trust your eye. If it doesn't look right, change a few little things. The devils are in the details. And I've talked to different old timers that have been doing this for years, and they pretty much told me the same thing, you know. They'll go out and they'll be carving a leaf. And the leaf may be perfectly flat as far as they can tell. But in their carvings or their bowls, they'll have to give it a little depth. Like they'll put a little concave here and make it convexed. And do it kind of randomly as their eye thinks it should appeal. And that seems to be the ticket here. So I've pretty much got this carved up here for the most part. At the top, I did put a little kind of taper up to where I'm going to put the nub, so it's not quite flat there as well. That was one of my first mistakes on my prototypes I was doing at first. I'd keep bringing them in, I'd show my wife, and she'd be like, no, you need to do this. No, you need to do that. Yeah, it gets kind of annoying, but it's also very helpful to get a second opinion on what you're doing. So I start out sanding here with about an 80 grit. And then I slowly work my way down to a 120 and then a 220 sandpaper. I'll take a look at it, make sure I get out all my rough spots. Well, I have it connected to both sides of the lathe. It's a little more stable that way. Then after I get done sanding, we'll start working on the little nub at the bottom and disconnecting it from my live center. So when I first started doing this, like I said, I used to kind of round it off at the bottom, and it just didn't quite look right. And as I did with the rest of the piece, I kind of start off here where I took that little nub and made it. And I started with an 80 grit, went to a 120, and then to my 220. I'm not sure if my steps are quite right with the sanding. I think they've got to be a little bit closer. I was kind of told you kind of double it every time. So my proportions are a little bit off, but these have been coming out really nice. So at this point, I've got the shape I want. I've got it sanded down to where I want it, and it's time to add a finish. For this, I'm using a high friction finish. It's made with walnut oil and has a little bit of shellac in it. Gives it just a little bit of color, and they've been turning out really nice. I've kind of liked the color that it's turned out. You know, for this you can use any kind of finish you want. Do your research. Go to your local woodworking store. Talk to them. See what they recommend. I kind of looked at a few different things, and this is what I decided for this project. One of the first ones. Then after I get done with the high friction polish, I take and finish it off with a little bit of beeswax, and it really brings out the shine in them. So we'll part this off here. Oops. Well, I went a little bit farther than I wanted to on that one. Normally I get them just to the point that I take my saw and cut them off. So from there I'll go over to my benchtop sander, and I'll just sand down that top piece where the stem is. Just a little bit. I'll finish it off with my orbital sander with some 220. Just to flatten it out, and add an eyelet to hang it from a tree. So these are the products I used. And as always, comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you liked the video. Give me a like, thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel. And let's share the video with our friends. Help the channel grow. And you can check out more of my videos where I build a cabin from the trees I cut down in my woods to building a pond by myself. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you continue with me on my journey.